Quiet Riot.
Hello, Quiet Rioters. It's me, Naomi, back with another general election debrief mini episode. By now you should have heard us analyse the Green Party result. We've had a deep dive on Northern Ireland and Wales, and Scotland is winging its way to you shortly. But today I wanted to cover the Lib Dems and their stunning result of 72 MPs that exceeded the expectations of even the most generous pre-election polls. They're my alma mater, my old party. I joined the Lib Dems at university under the late leader Charles Kennedy. When Blair was in number 10, at the time they had, 46 MPs. They were fervently against the Iraq War. They were campaigning to scrap tuition fees and to legalise drugs. Having come straight from Northern Ireland, where proportional representation was a key driver of the success of the Good Friday Agreement, I was impressed that the Lib Dems backed equal votes too. What was not to like in all of that for a young lefty Liberal? At the next election in 2001, they climbed to 52 seats, and by 2005 won a then historic 62 seats, many of them in university areas. And as the staffer at Lib Dem HQ responsible for running the student campaign at that election, I was proud and delighted for them. Then came short spells for Vince Cable and Ming Campbell at the helm, followed swiftly by Nick Clegg in 2007. I feared the party was turning away from its social liberal roots, a view consolidated after the 2010 election, when despite winning fewer seats than 2005, they entered coalition with the Conservatives, ultimately leading to near wipeout in 2015, returning just 8 MPs. The next 2 elections continued to be brutal. I was no longer a member. I didn't feel so much that I had left the party, but the party had most definitely left me, becoming much less radical and advocating fewer social liberal policies than under Kennedy. Since 2019, they did of course have some stunning by-election wins in places like North Shropshire, Cheshire and Amersham. They were winning seats from 3rd place. So going into the 2024 general election, they were very buoyed by these results and strong local elections. So their aim was to return to Parliament as the 3rd largest party once more. They did it. They managed it. So I wanted to dissect that campaign with a real insider. So I hot-footed it to Parliament to find one of their best MPs.
Quiet Riot.
And I'm delighted to be joined by Liberal Democrat MP for Oxford West and Abingdon, Layla Moran. Layla, welcome to your inaugural Quiet Riot.
Oh, it's so great to be here with you in Parliament, back. Oh my God, again. 3rd time round.
Congratulations on your
Thank
re-election. Look, we've had cabinet appointments, we've had shadow cabinet appointments, and the Lib Dems now have a sufficient number of MPs that you don't all have to cover several briefs at once. When will Ed do his appointments, and what gig do you really want?
It would be really nice to have help. I still cover foreign affairs and science, technology and innovation. And almost certainly at some point we'll have a reshuffle. Ed's been really clear he wants to wait until conference, and at least after conference, because we've got 72 colleagues, but of which 63 were elected. Only 2 are coming back from having been here before. So we've got to give them some time.
Yeah.
You know, they still don't know. They don't have offices. They're wandering around, wondering where the toilets are. They have barely any staff, if any.
Yeah.
They need some time. And, well, we've got some great talent among them. And I think the reshuffle will be exciting when it happens. As for what I want, it all depends. There's select committee chairships up. I've really enjoyed, particularly the foreign affairs. Enjoyed is the wrong word, but I've really felt like I've made an impact and a difference by having this brief during particularly what's happened in Israel and Palestine. But I am also...
And Brexit.
And indeed, yes.
We'll get on to that.
And I think that's going to be quite interesting what happens with Europe over the course of this Parliament. Already it's been mentioned a couple of times in the King's Speech opening, and I'm really excited for that. So we'll see. I do fancy a change, but I don't know to what yet.
Well, let's start then with the election campaign. Now, it seemed to me that the Lib Dems made a very strategic choice to forego having big ticket national messages in favour of a very hyper-targeted seat strategy. You've got more MPs now than ever, and I think you're second in about 27 more seats, of which 6 might be realistic gains next time round. You're kind of within the 5% margin behind the winner. I think they're all Tory held. Can anyone argue that that wasn't the right approach to go into the election with?
I don't think anyone can at this point. I mean, the success speaks for itself. It is built in part because of national wins. We know that. It's built in part because, yes, reform stood, although the effect of that we know is quite variable and needs drilling down. But ultimately, it would not have happened had we not run a cracking campaign with the right messages. And I think we started to see over the course of particularly the last 12 months the effect that sort of talking about the NHS, sewage, over and over again, the effect that that was having, and people then knowing what they were saying during the election. So it was actually, I think, one of the smoothest campaigns we've ever run. What people also don't appreciate is the enormity of the campaign's effort that went in on the ground. So there was a conscious effort after 2019 that if we are going to turn this ship around, we needed to invest in our campaign staff. And so it was a combination of messages that people really found popular, not populist, but popular messages, and then a concerted effort behind the campaign's staff as well. And the combination of the two has really paid off.
But you weren't targeting 72.
Well, no, quite. But the
so
point,
you have exceeded even.
We've exceeded that. And but that said, it's been built a little bit over time. If you see the places where we did get seats, they're either seats we've held before, or they're places where we've recently won a number of councils or councillors. We've been making progress in a lot of those seats for some time. They just weren't on paper viable targets at the beginning of the last parliament. But a lot of them started coming towards us during Boris Johnson. I know everyone thinks it's Truss, but a lot of it was a Boris Johnson effect, which then was cemented by Liz Truss. And by the time Sunak, took over, it was too late. They'd already decided they wanted change, and we were that viable option on the ground.
Well, going into the election, the leader, Ed Davey, was in a relatively sticky wicket, I would say, coming under scrutiny for his role in the post office scandal that was continuing to dominate the headlines as an issue at the start of this year, and pretty sluggish national vote share poll ratings for the Lib Dems. So did the campaigns team have much of an option, therefore, but to run the national picture as being Ed Davey as this fun-loving, very family-oriented leader? I mean, it really was quite the rebrand.
It was the family man actually is not, and as some of your listeners might know, I stood against him in the leadership. That was actually very much what he went on, and actually a lot of the messages he started talking about then, caring in particular, and his responsibilities, have carried through and paid dividends. And to that, I can only pay him credit because he saw but round corners, which is what you want in a leader. In terms of the Ed in a wetsuit, I will have to tell you that was a bit of a surprise to all of us. It's not something I'd seen before, but I'm sure, like everyone, there is a fun side that maybe you don't always bring to work. And, credit to the press team and everyone else who got him. You can't do that unless you are very comfortable in your skin. And it's quite exposing, quite literally and politically, to sort of do that. And it was a little bit Marmite.
When you're also campaigning on how grossly filthy the water is.
I know. But
to submerge yourself in it, very brave.
But that was the whole point, wasn't it? There was a national conversation as to whether or not he'd get gastroenteritis. And that was exactly the point. So no, I mean, there will be a wash-up of this election campaign. We will learn from it. But I think we must also learn the things that went well from it.
Absolutely.
And they did take some risks with, being bubbly Ed and not serious Ed, but actually he pulled it off because the messages that lay underneath were actually quite serious and were talked about in a tone that was really serious.
So there was a consistency between the fun and the serious. So for our listeners who may not quite understand how significant returning to being the third largest party in Parliament is, what does it practically mean for Lib Dems?
So, to be perfectly honest with you, Naomi, we haven't quite worked it out yet in its entirety because it's been so long. Because it was actually, I've never known it. I joined the party in 2007.
By then you were Nick Clegg.
By then we were Nick Clegg. No, actually, it was Ming, and then it was Nick Clegg. And we barely knew the party in that phase. And then it was into coalition government, and then it was, the wipeout in 2015. So it has been a 10-year resurgence that has been dying to come but never managed to reach. So one thing I've noticed is that, all of us are worrying much more about our shoes because we actually sit on a front bench, which means you can see our shoes so much more.
Amazing. Shoe shopping.
So shoe shopping is high up the agenda. But in all seriousness, it also means, so for tomorrow on the King's Speech, there is Foreign Affairs Day. And what that means is, as the Foreign Affairs spokesperson, I don't get called nearly last like before. In fact, I've got a sort of reserved slot. That's huge. It means that you get
more PMQs, presumably.
You get more PMQs. Your messages are going to come across earlier in the chamber. It also means more responsibility, though. It means you have to cover
more scrutiny,
which is fine.
Yeah.
And you also get Westminster Halls, and so there's a practical element to all of this. I don't envy Wendy right now, our chief whip, because she's doing the job on her own. She doesn't have a deputy. She doesn't have duty whips. We are all scrambling. And then there's, this gorgeous cohort of 60 odd MPs who have never done this before, all trying to run before they can walk and are just so talented. I think I'm so excited for what a force for good the Liberal Democrats can be with the increased
Let's talk about
visibility.
That, because I've never known the Lib Dems to have so many MPs. They've never, in the current incantation of the party,
1928 was the last time
when
we had
they
this
were
many.
not the Liberal Democrats. They were a different party. So I've never known them have this many MPs, but potentially less influence given the size of the Labour majority. Is there a frustration there?
Always. I mean, but any party, you don't join a political party or go into this job without wanting your party to be the party of government. That's the way it works. So, of course, there's frustration. I am heartened by some of the things that we've started to see from Keir Starmer. He's already talking about working with other parties, and Ed's laid down the gauntlet, particularly on social care, which I think is the big intractable issue that we need to be dealing with as a society. And, that's how you're going to fix the NHS. So, absolutely, we will hold them to account when needed, but I hope they'll allow us to work constructively with them. I've sidled up to and you've got to also remember, I've spent the last 7 years in opposition with all of these friends of mine who are now ministers.
Yep.
And I sidled up to a couple of them going, so can we do this campaign now? Can we do that? Can we finally get it over the line? Because we got it so close, and now they're ministers, and now they've got power, but I very much hope they don't forget where some of these ideas came from.
Absolutely, and we're going to talk about that a bit more later.
Quiet Riot.
I'd like to turn to where the Lib Dem vote came from. There's a couple of things I'd like to ask you about. So first, there was huge efficiency of vote trading between the Lib Dems and Labour with tactical voting. And when you look at the vast majority of the seats that the Lib Dems now hold, they are in the least deprived areas of the country: bar St Ives, Torbay, and bits of Eastbourne. Having canvassed there with Josh, I can tell you, are not in any way deprived, but other parts are. So in many senses, you could sort of say, well, the Lib Dems are a party representing some very leafy, affluent areas that might be opposed to age-old Liberal policies around wealth taxation, house building, and perhaps even, in some areas, pro-Europeanism. So, Layla, will this footprint of the party impact how you oppose the new government? I remember under Charles Kennedy, the Lib Dems challenged Blair's administration very much from the left. But is it fair to assume that under Ed, they'll be challenging Starmer more from the centre-right? So, it's a good question. And I'd like to think, first of all, the sort of the left-right dichotomy for Liberals doesn't always work for us. So, on things like the economy, actually, we will be looking for fiscal responsibility. We might even start, having things that we want to attack from, I don't even know what you call it, free trade. Where is that? For us, it's a liberal principle, and it's part of why we will be pushing them on Europe. And Ed has already mentioned Europe and started to talk about it in this parliament. So I think there are elements where we will push them from that place. There are others where, like on the 2-child benefit cap and child poverty, we will absolutely, yes, do we have the highest levels of child poverty of other MPs? No, but do we have children in poverty even in places like Oxford, Western, Abingdon and Whitney? Of course we do, and we get them in our inboxes, and we are assiduous constituency MPs who engage 90% of our energy into our communities. And we will be Liberals, who are the Liberals who founded the welfare state, who are proud of the long history that we have in helping the poorest in society, because free from poverty, ignorance and conformity is in our
DNA as a party. So yes, of course, we will be mindful of those who are more moneyed, but they've elected Liberal Democrats and we've never been shy about who we are.
Forgive me for not knowing, what's the party position on VAT and private schools?
So we believe that private schools need, especially if they've got charitable status and get tax breaks, should be encouraged to do more, and the party's policy is that we would review, particularly on charitable status. We don't think that the VAT thing is going to help much. We think that many of the schools are just going to find ways around it, and in places like Oxford, West and Abingdon, actually some of these schools genuinely work really well with state schools. We prefer the emphasis to be on improving state schools and finding money from elsewhere. I mean, our manifesto was criticised because we have more public spending in our manifesto, and education was one of the areas. We don't think that necessarily that's going to do what it's meant to do. The principle of where do you give tax breaks and where do you give money should be in the state system, we agree on, but as often is the way with Labour, we want the end product that's the same.
Just don't always agree on.
We don't agree with how to get there.
I must admit, I was surprised that they didn't introduce it as something that would come in a phased way over 4 years or something. The second thing I wanted your view on is the Greens, who also, of course, had a very impressive election result, and along with some independent candidates, mopped up some of the pro-Palestinian vote that was frustrated by the Starmer position. Unlike the Lib Dems, they did very well with younger voters, picking up 14% of the 18 to 24-year-old group, up 10 points on 2019. Layla, you've often led the pro-ceasefire debate in Parliament, and I know you push very hard within your own party on issues that matter to younger voters. Why hasn't the Lib Dem current incarnation performed better with young people?
Well, first of all, it depends where, right? Because again, we have the strategy of within our own seats. Very definitely, I would say it was younger voters who were voting for us, and that's one of the features of our parliamentary party now. Actually, by and large, if you look at us, we are much younger. But also, they were noticing how many more younger voters were voting Lib Dem in this election.
Are you no longer the youngest Lib Dem?
Absolutely, not by any shot. No, we've got, I think,
young at heart. Just stay young at heart, Layla, you'll be fine.
I know, I will always be 25 in my heart, which I think is our youngest MP is now 25.
Wow.
So, yeah, I went from the youngest to being very middle-aged. And I'm okay with that. It's probably about time. However, like in terms of the younger vote, I think we did make a good offer for them in the seats where we were able to get that message out. And then in other seats, you know, it was another party that managed to do it. The change narrative, I think, was what younger voters wanted. I think there's a lot of work to do still with gaining their trust in politics as a whole. And the thing that worries me the most, more than, you know, this party or that party, is the number of young people who don't believe in any parties, who don't believe that democracy is going to serve them. And some of them even moving to very strange populist positions. I think we have a lot of work to do, not just the Lib Dems, but politics as a whole, to engage with younger voters for sure.
Layla, thank you so much for your time today and talking us through all things Lib Demery. What summer recess plans do you have?
Not much, because of the election being called so late. We didn't get around to booking some holiday. I will go visit my parents who live in Brussels, and we're going to get away, I think, probably in the conference recess.
Oh, lovely. Well, let's get you back on Quiet Riot around those recesses and those holidays, because we would absolutely love to have you on the show again.
Would be a delight.
And there we have it, folks. I hope you enjoyed hearing Layla's debrief as much as I did. I fervently hope the Lib Dems will resist the urge to occupy the vacuum that's been left by Cameronites, and will instead draw inspiration from the Charles Kennedy years once more. But for now, I won't be joining a political party anytime soon. Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Alex Andreu, Kenny Campbell and me, Naomi Smith, in partnership with Soundstone Global. Music is by Mariana Sangeeta and artwork by Simona Canelli.
Quiet Riot.
That's better.
Do you want your...
Yeah.
Grab it.
Is that
it? Yeah, of course. Love your dress, by the way. Is it really hot, though?
Thank you. No, it's fine.
Okay.
It's very
really,
thin.
really nice.
Gorgeous. I've got it in 3 colours.
There you go,
decided
Kenny.
this
Kenny,
is
you
my
can
look.
keep that in.
This is my look.
she looks
Yeah, we can talk about shoes
absolutely
if you like as well.
hot.